The movie begins with a woman named Sarah, who is a successful painter. She is busy working on a painting in her studio. The painting shows the portrait of a mother feeding her child. Satisfied with her work, she decides to take a break and go out to eat. While having lunch, she sees a woman with her child goofing around, having fun. This sight makes the woman melancholic. She misses her mom. All her family members except her father have passed away. Bottling up her emotions, she takes the bus and arrives back to her dorm. She lives with her friend named Barbara. Back home, she calls out to her friend but there is no response. Looking around, she arrives at her bedroom and knocks. Still no response. She then creaks the door open and sees her friend donning headphones, busy in her Zumba session. Taking this opportunity, she goes to scare the hell out of the poor girl. Barbara shouts as she feels something creeping in on her. Looking back, she finds Sarah and quickly calms down. The two greet each other and it turns out Sarah is shortly going back home. Her semester is about to end and it's the end of her program. Barbara wishes that she would not go back and stay with her some more. As they converse, it turns out that a pool party is going to take place sometime later and the girls are going there to have fun. Barbara then gets busy selecting her dress to wear for the party. Sarah also goes to her room to check for a dress to wear when all of a sudden, she gets a phone call. The woman picks it up and turns out, it's regarding the house she put up for sale. The old house that her grandmother owned was passed down to Sarah and since she didn't live there, she decided to sell it off. However, now it seems some original documents are missing. She tries to ask him to proceed without them but the man cuts the call. Now Sarah has to go back to her grandmother's house and bring back the original document. She apologizes to Barbara who would be going with her. The woman brushes off her apology and asks her to chill. It's not like the party would end, as it is supposed to last all weekend. Barbara says that they will probably be a couple of hours late so it is not a big deal. They take up their belongings and are on their way to the old house. Downstairs, the girls meet Barbara's boyfriend Goats and her friend Rico. Rico happens to have a crush on Sarah but the latter doesn't pay him much heed. They load their belongings in the car. Goats and Barbara sit in the backseat while Sarah drives the car and Rico occupies the passenger seat. Shortly after, they set off towards their destination through a lonely road amidst the woods. The group stops midway for a break. Goats goes out for a leak and Barbara falls asleep while Rico engages in conversation with an uninterested Sarah. He asks the woman about her future plans and asks her why not just stay in Italy instead of going back to her home. Since she is an art history student, it would be more beneficial for her to stay and opt for future studies in Italy. After the group is back in the car, she tells them about how she never knew her grandmother. She only inherited the house because the old woman had no other blood relatives and after Sarah's mother passed away. They resume their journey through the creepy woods with not a soul inside. Goats comments how her grandma must have loved her privacy since there is not a single house inside. Just then, Barbara gets a call from her friend, however the reception is bad. The others also notice how they have no signals on their phones too. Barbara's call cuts just moments after her friend tells her that the party has been cancelled. She tells this news to the others who show disappointment. Just then, out of nowhere, a huge tree comes crashing down in front of their car. Sarah whips the car to the side, just in the nick of time. The group panics and Sarah slams the brake, breathing hard. She then freaks out, apologizing to them. Rico tries his best to calm her down. As she finally settles her anxious breaths and is ready to drive on, they see a house come in their view. Turns out, they are almost at the place that they wanted to visit. Sarah drives the little distance up to the front door and they descend the car one by one. The house seems quite beautiful. They approach the main gate and see the name inscribed on a plate just near the door. Sarah looks down and finds the key in the flower pot near the door. She tells them to wait while she goes to leave the documents there. The others do not complain since the party's cancelled, thus there is no reason to hurry. Sarah opens the door and enters. However, the others, instead of waiting outside, decide to come in too. Inside, Barbara looks for the light switch, commenting that she doubts it would even work. Just then Rico turns on the switch and much to her surprise, it does work. Sarah tells them that she heard there is a housekeeper who comes in every once in a while and cleans up the place. The people go further in and explore the house. There seems to be quite an unhealthy amount of dust covering the place. Noting this, Goats comments that they should probably pay the housekeeper less since he does not do his job well. Shortly after, Barbara and Goats go up to explore the second floor while Rico follows Sarah around. Sarah drops the documents on the table and Rico tries to flirt with her once more. He tells her that perhaps she can buy him dinner after the house is sold successfully. Sarah, on the other hand, rejects him completely. She tells him that she is going back to the States in 2 weeks and thus she cannot afford to spend time with him. He better stop with his persistent following. Right that moment, they hear noise coming from the second floor. Scared for their friends, Sarah and Rico rush up. On the way there, they hear a third voice shouting at their friends and saying something in Italian. As Sarah comes into view, she watches an older-looking man holding an axe and threatening her friends. The man hears footsteps and whips around to find Rico and Sarah. The two flinch back at the man's threatening appearance. He seems rugged with a white eye and a terrifying axe in hand. He sees Sarah and seems to recognize her somehow. Slowly lowering his axe, he turns around and leaves. After he goes, the group sighs in relief. They talk about how dangerous he looked. Sarah tells them that perhaps he is the caretaker named Quoro that she was told about. They ask her about what he was saying. Sarah seems to only catch a few phrases. Turns out, the man was warning them not to go up and that something dangerous might be there. Goats had tried going up and thus he had stormed in, snapping at the couple. The man says that he didn't entirely go up, but he saw that there were stairs leading up to an attic or something. Sarah tells them that it is better if they just don't go up there. The two men then step out to breathe fresh air. Inside, Sarah and Barbara decide to explore the rest of the room. They enter a room that looks like a bedroom. There, Sarah sees a painting of her grandmother and becomes a little unsettled. The eyes of the painting seem to bore down on her menacingly. Scared, she decides to exit the room and go see the rest of the place. They enter the next bedroom, which probably would have been her mother's. Her friend exclaims, saying how amazing it would be if they could find her mother's portrait or something. It would make for an amazing souvenir for her. Sarah, however, declines. She says that souvenirs are for remembering, but she doesn't remember anything. She then tells Barbara about how her parents met. Her father happens to be a fireman. He saved her mother from an accident in which she lost her memory and couldn't remember anything that happened to her before. Barbara thinks of this as romantic, but Sarah has her doubts. She says that the lawyer remembered her name and address and she came to inherit this place, so how could it be that her mother didn't remember anything? Just then, Goats calls Barbara and she goes out while Sarah decides to stay in the room for a little while longer. Later, she comes down and sets all the documents in order. Just when it is the time for them to depart, Barbara comes in, asking her if they can stay during the weekend. Sarah is unwilling at first, but the woman manages to persuade her. The group then decides to enjoy their weekend in this old creepy house. Night falls and the group settles in the living room. They eat and drink. As they are nearly out of alcohol, Goats remembers how he saw a bottle in the forbidden room upstairs. Rico comments that they would probably not be shunned if they borrow a few bottles. Saying this, the three others go up to fetch them. Sarah, oblivious to their plans, stays there. Just then, she receives a phone call from her father. The signal is weak, thus she misses out on most of what he says. They greet each other and the man asks about the party and if she is alright. As the man speaks about avoiding her nan's old house, the signals worsen and the phone cuts. After the phone cuts, she gets up to go and look for the others. The house sounds eerily quiet. Shouting for them, she goes upstairs. There, she hears noise coming from one corner. Turns out, they have ascended the stairs that they were not meant to. She follows the noise and sure enough, they are there. The place is scarily dark and a huge piece of furniture covered in a white cloth sits in a corner. Just above the furniture is the bottle that Rico and Goats seem to want. They think it is some kind of liquor and thus they are straining to reach for it. However, their efforts fail when the huge cupboard seems to slide to the left and the bottle falls. The boys curse out loud. Behind the furniture, a strange door comes into view. They all look at it with curiosity in their eyes. They all wonder what the old woman was hiding back there. Sarah tells them that she doesn't like the idea of them going inside, but sure enough, curiosity slayed the cat. Not listening to her, they all decide to just go in for a look. The boys push aside the huge obstacle half blocking the door. After clearing the path, they all barge in. The inside of the room is creepy as hell. They find a strange bottle filled with creepy liquids and herbs. Rico wonders, thinking that perhaps Sarah's grandmother was a scientist or something. Sarah looks around and finds a book that contains occult symbols and pictures of demons. The book and its ambience sends a shiver down her spine. She puts it aside when a strange tablet catches her eye. She picks it up. The tablet seems laden with dust. After brushing that off, she reads the inscription on its back and, not understanding a word, puts it back down. All of a sudden, the room's temperature drops, hinting at some supernatural activity in the background. The group gathers around the tablet, wondering what it might be. Sarah guesses the language upon it to be Latin. All of a sudden, the lights start flickering and Sarah says that they should probably go out now. Everyone goes out except Goats, who ends up looking at the strange board a tad bit longer than the others. Soon, he too exits the room after turning off the light. Once they all go downstairs, Goats asks Sarah if her grandma was a Satanist. This woman just told them this afternoon that she barely knew her grandmother. He probably wants to just make fun of her. Sarah, however, says that she probably made her homemade remedies there or something. This woman is either in denial or maybe she is just that ignorant. Then, Sarah hears thunder rumbling and goes to look out from the window. It seems as though it might rain sometimes later. Bored out of their minds, they sprawl on the sofas. Rico muses how nice it would have been if Sarah's grandmother played Monopoly. Hearing this, Goats takes out the Ouija board and tells them that he has a better idea. Seeing the board, Sarah gets angry at him, but the man makes fun of her instead. He says that she must be scared. After getting mocked, Sarah's blood boils and she decides to go with the plan of trying out the board. The friends gather around the Ouija board with thunder rumbling outside. What an aesthetic atmosphere to call on some evil spirits. Rico tells them that they need to put something on the board and then call out to spirits. They use a shot glass and then begin calling out to lingering spirits. After a moment of this, they stop but nothing answers their call. Barbara suggests trying to call on someone they know. As they are talking, all of a sudden, the lights flicker and they hear strange whooshing sounds. Terrified, Barbara starts screaming. Shortly, the noise stops and everything goes back to normal. The friends finally breathe in relief and laugh at how they were freaking out. They probably think it was nothing. Soon they all decide to retire for the day. Sarah goes to the bedroom and almost has a heart attack after seeing her reflection in the mirror. But unbeknownst to her, there is a shadow lurking beside her. In the meantime, Rico goes out to light a cigarette. There, he seems to sense some presence in the woods but ignores it. Back upstairs, in her room, Sarah takes a pill and drifts off to sleep. In her sleep, she sees fragmented memories of her childhood. In there, she sees herself playing with her toys when her mother stretches out her hands towards her. Although initially menacing, they soon caress her with love. Her mother then slowly goes towards the window. Opening it, she glances back one last time and then... The next morning, Sarah wakes up with a start after falling down the bed in her sleep. The nightmare leaves her with a sour taste in her mouth. Going outside, she wanders into the nearby woods. After walking for a while, she hears a loud thudding noise and grabs a wooden branch to protect herself. Peeking around the corner, she sees that it is the caretaker. He grabs the plank from her and tells her not to wander around. Both of them then go inside the caretaker's chamber. In the kitchen, Sarah asks the man about how long he has lived there. It turns out he lived there all his life. He also tells Sarah that he recognized her because she looks exactly like her mother. Hearing this, the woman comes to sit down. After settling down, she asks him about why her mother left and why she lied about losing her memory. The man tells her that perhaps she didn't want to remember everything that was here. They get into an argument after the man tells her that there is an ancient dark spirit in the secret room and her mother wanted to protect her, that is why she lied about her memory. Sarah snaps at him. According to the man, if her mother really wanted to protect her, then she should not have left her alone. She calls the man crazy since she does not believe in all the superstitious stuff. Before she gets up to leave, the man stops her and takes out an old pendant. Back then, Sarah's mother had left the pendant with the man before leaving the house, thus he gives it to her. As she leaves, the man warns her once more to stay far away from the room. Once out, she finds Rico, who had been calling out to her. He tells her that she was sleeping, so they went out for a walk. Barbara gets into an argument with Goats and goes for a walk while the others come back inside the house. Back in the house, Sarah freshens up and takes out the pendant that the caretaker gave her. As she is looking at it, she is startled by Barbara's sudden voice telling her that she is going to take a shower. She drops the pendant and it slides under the cabinet. Downstairs, Goats is busy irritating Rico after Barbara calls the latter a real man. Guess someone is jealous. Back upstairs, Sarah crouches down to take out the pendant when she finds drawings under the cabinet. The cheerful-looking drawings soon turn ominous. Unbeknownst to her, a strange shadow passes by her in the background. On the other side, Rico grabs the lighter and feels an ominous aura emanating from the painting on the wall. Exiting the bathroom, he comes across the bathroom where Barbara is taking a shower. The door seems ajar and his eyes wander inside. Just then, Sarah enters and catches him in the act. The flustered boy tries to defend himself, but to no avail. Later that night, all the friends gather at the dining table where Goats and Barbara get into yet another fight. The woman storms off and Goats goes after her. All alone, Rico tries to defend himself once more, but Sarah cuts him off. She tells him that it is all right and puts half the blame on poor Barbara, who, according to her, comes off as needy when men are around. What a nice friend. Sadly for Barbara, she comes inside right that moment and overhears Sarah. Hurt, the woman lights her cigarette and storms off once more despite Sarah pleading with her and apologizing. There is no use crying over spilt milk now. Quite some time passes, yet Barbara isn't back. Goats packs his bags and is ready to go. He insists that whether Barbara comes back or not, he is going back. Worried, Sarah and Rico set out to look for her in the dark woods. Back inside the house, Goats is angered at the situation. He curses at Barbara for going off and making him late. While smoking, he feels a strange force pull him in and he comes to sit on the table where the Ouija board lies. Meanwhile, Sarah and Rico are still looking for Barbara. While roaming around the woods, Sarah tells Rico that they must find the girl lest something should happen to her. Rico is shocked at what Sarah is saying, but the woman seems to strongly believe in the existence of an evil creature inside and around this abode. Back inside the house, the lights go out and Goats looks around with his lighter in hand. He hears a strange noise and grabs a weapon to defend himself. All of a sudden, there's a gush of wind that renders his lighter useless. Terrified, he shouts at the person who is freaking him out. Just then someone pops up behind him and he blindly attacks the person. As he smashes the person's head with his weapon, the lights turn on and his blood runs cold. The lifeless person lying on the floor turns out to be none other than poor Barbara. Right that moment, Rico and Sarah also come in and catch Goats with the weapon. He stands motionless over Barbara's lifeless body. Sarah freaks out and starts shouting at him. Rico, however, pulls the woman behind him and tries to persuade Goats to put down his weapon. The man, however, seems strangely possessed. He refuses to put down the weapon and starts advancing towards them. As he is about to attack them, the caretaker appears and hits him in the head. Goats passes out and they take a breath of relief. Rico then asks them to call the police. However, the caretaker tells him that the police cannot help them now. He tells Sarah that only she can help them now by facing the shadows. Rico is appalled at the words and tells Sarah to keep it together. Sarah pays no attention to him and listens to the caretaker instead. The man tells her that after her mother left, her grandmother went insane from the pain of missing her daughter. She lost the little bit of humanity that she had and cursed her daughter to have the same fate as herself, to suffer the pain of losing a daughter, but Sarah's mother chose to end her life instead of risking her daughter to suffer pain. Now that Sarah is here, she must face the darkness and find out exactly what her mother was running from. She pleads with Rico to let her do this and the man relents despite himself. Rico stays there with Goats, who is slowly gaining consciousness while Sarah and the caretaker go to the secret room. Goats finally gains consciousness and begs Rico to leave the place, but Rico tells him that they will leave soon after Sarah is done. He still persuades Rico into untying a knot so he could breathe a little while. Rico does so, not knowing that the man holds a knife hidden in his hand. After he unties, Goetz begins cutting the other knot slowly with the knife. He finally frees himself after some tries and lures Rico in under the pretense of being helpless. He asks him for a cigarette and after getting the chance, attacks the poor boy with the knife. Back in the secret room, the caretaker and Sarah put down the Ouija board and start the ritual. Sarah asks the man why he didn't protect her mother and the man replies that he was scared of her grandmother. The old witch was terrifying, even more so after her death. Before they begin the ritual, Rico bangs on the door. They open it to find an injured and bleeding Rico telling them that Goetz has freed himself with a knife. They try to stop the bleeding. The caretaker leaves with the axe to hunt down Goetz while the other two remain back in the room. The caretaker goes down and follows a streak of blood outside. There he is horrified to find the lifeless body of Goetz. It turns out that the evil spirit has now possessed Rico. He shouts to inform Sarah but to no avail. Back in the room, Sarah tells Rico that she must burn down this accursed house and board before they can go back. While she is busy looking for inflammables, Rico grabs the knife and warns her against it. Just then, the caretaker also arrives banging on the door. He shouts at Sarah to be careful. This man has a bloody axe, yet he decides to use the wooden end of this weapon to bang the door instead of breaking it down. While Sarah is struggling for her life inside, Rico starts insulting her mother and slowly approaches Sarah with the knife. As he attacks her, Sarah sees the portrait of her mother and a sudden surge of power enters her body. She resists the attack and plunges the knife back inside the man. Rico falls down and so does Sarah. The caretaker finally opens the door and bursts inside before Sarah finally passes out. The movie ends with Sarah lying in a hospital bed. Her eyes fly open and a black shadow lingers near her. It turns out that the evil spirit entered her body after Rico passed away.